Congratulations on making the important decision to become a teacher. You will acquire a plethora of tools for your coveted teacher tool belt through UNE's thoughtful and thorough education program. However, you must first understand the nuts and bolts of lesson planning. While you will take a specific course detailing curriculum concepts like lesson planning, many of your other education courses require you to develop lessons and unit plans to meet their specific purposes. To ensure consistency and clarity, this video will walk you through the basic elements of lesson planning and the steps to creating a successful lesson plan. Let's start by defining a lesson plan. Essentially, a lesson plan is a detailed description of the daily goals and learning activities for a block of instruction, which is usually one class period. As teachers, we have to plan out what we want our students to achieve, how we will help them achieve those goals, and how we will know they have reached those goals. We do this by writing out daily lesson plans. So what is included in a lesson plan? Let's look at a UNE lesson plan template for a visual. You will have basic contextual information, learning targets, which are standards and learning objectives, essential questions, the lesson progression or the body of the lesson, which is often called gradual release, and as you see here, that's the I do, we do, you do with the students, differentiation, and assessment. So where do I start? Teachers plan using what is called backward design, meaning that we start with the end in mind. So we must know what exactly we want our students to know or be able to do before we plan a lesson. Moreover, a lesson is a subsection of a unit plan. So it is important to remember that lessons are not planned in isolation of one another. They are all pieces of a unit. A unit plan is much more extensive, lasting multiple weeks, and daily lessons make up a unit plan. In your actual classroom, you would never design a single lesson without first designing the unit. However, during your education courses, you will be asked to do that simply due to time constraints and intended outcomes for particular courses. So what you'll need to remember is to at least have an idea of what kind of unit your lesson is a part of. Ideally, you will select 2 or 3 subject area standards to chunk together as a unit. This will define what you want the students to know and be able to do by the end of the unit. However, if you are writing only one lesson, students will only be working on one part of one of those standards during the lesson you create. But how do you get there? Follow these steps. First, select the standard or standards you want students to work toward. Unpack the standards. Create a learning objective and essential question. Create a formative assessment. Find a hook. Develop an effective learning progression. Add differentiation. List out all contextual information. The first step in any type of curriculum planning is selecting and unpacking the standards you want the students to achieve. The standards for any subject can be found at the main Department of Education website. You'll want to select a standard, or 2 or 3, that fit your purpose for the course you are designing a lesson plan for. For example, your particular methods courses will require you to select standards in that particular subject area. Otherwise, select standards that you feel are of primary importance for students to know, or ones that you feel particularly knowledgeable or passionate about, as that comfort will help you become more easily acclimated to the process of lesson planning. With a standard selected, you'll need to do what we call unpacking or unwrapping the standard. Many of these standards are so broad and jargon-laden that they need a bit of deciphering. Plus, as a teacher, you need to know exactly what the standard is explicitly and implicitly asking the students to know and do. To unpack a standard, you circle the student-centered verbs and underline the nouns. The verbs represent what students must do, and the nouns represent what students must know. You'll list these into 2 columns, like this. Then take a moment to consider what else students must need to know and do in order to truly meet this standard. List those no's and do's in the appropriate columns. Unpacking the standard will help you understand the magnitude of the standard and the components of teaching students to reach this standard. It will also help you develop your learning objective for each lesson. Each lesson must have a learning objective that is clear and measurable. It represents the learning goal for the day. Many learning objectives start with the phrase, "Students will be able to." This is a solid way to start an objective, but there are really 4 criteria to making a strong learning objective: the condition, the knowledge, the skills, and the criteria for success. Take a look at your unpacked standard and consider what components of the standard could be achieved at the end of one lesson. Then consider how you would measure if the students knew those concepts or could perform those skills. This will help you develop your learning objective. In conjunction with a learning objective, you'll want to create an essential question. An essential question is an overarching question that gets the students thinking about the value of learning, the concepts or skills of this particular lesson. It should be a question that students might naturally ask and prompt them to see what they are learning as transferable and useful. Once you have a learning objective and essential question, you must create the formative assessment. A formative assessment is an assessment for learning. It takes place while learning is still occurring. Therefore, every lesson plan needs a formative assessment. It assesses if the students have met the daily learning objective. So, how will you know if students have met the objective for the day? A worksheet? Exit ticket? Conference? Group activity? Quiz? Journal entry? Take the time to plan the daily assessment and make sure it truly measures the learning objective. Next, you'll begin to plan the meat of the lesson. This starts with what we call a hook. Just like a fisherman snatches a fish, you'll need to capture your students' attention with an engaging lesson beginning. How can you start the lesson in a way that piques students' interests or connects to their lives? You can start by reflecting on your essential question. Can you use that as part of your hook? Or is there a quick activity, video, or scenario you can use? Strong hooks both engage students and help them connect the upcoming new information to prior knowledge. With a hook in place, you'll need to then develop the rest of the learning progression. Many lessons follow what is called a gradual release of responsibility, or an I do, we do, you do progression. The concept is similar to teaching a child how to swim. First, they have a flotation device with 3 bubbles, then 2, then 1, then they are swimming on their own. Essentially, you'll want to be sure to find a way to teach the concepts and skills and provide time for students to practice this knowledge or these new skills. While not all lessons employ this process, many do, and those that do not must still account for the necessary scaffolding or support of the learning as it is occurring during the lesson. When developing the body of the lesson, it is important that you carefully consider and select the most appropriate instructional strategies. For example, you will not want to lecture for 45 minutes, as you will lose the student's interest. Similarly, you will not want to have the students writing a personal journal entry if the daily learning objective requires research and collaboration. So whether you use the I do, we do, you do method or create a different learning progression, be sure you take the time to explain how you will get the students from point A, or the start of class, to point B, the end of class, with mastery of the daily learning objective. While it may seem like you are now done, you are not. One of the most important aspects of lesson planning is considering how you will differentiate for your vastly different learners. While you will learn about specific strategies for differentiation in many of your courses here at UNE, it is important to always remember the 4 ways you can differentiate: process, product, content, and environment. Somewhere in your lesson plan, you want to explain how you will differentiate for learners who may need more support and learners who may be advanced. Additionally, you'll want to remember that students learn in different ways, visually, auditorily, tactilely, and have different strengths. Consider Gardner's multiple intelligences. So be sure to plan for sharing information in multiple modes throughout your lesson. With all of the planning completed, be sure to go back up to the top of your lesson plan and fill in any missing contextual information such as materials or anticipated duration. Then, review the plan to ensure alignment between the objective, the delivery, and the assessment. At that point, you have planned a successful lesson on paper, and the final step, which many of you won't encounter until you're student teaching, is delivering that lesson and taking the time to reflect on its effectiveness, revising it accordingly for the next time you deliver it, and adapting your instruction for the next day as needed based on the student's performance on the formative assessment. I know this is a lot of information, but rest assured knowing that you will practice the art of lesson planning many times while here at UNE. By the time you enter your own classroom, you will be well versed in all areas of curriculum planning. Best of luck on your journey through the program. Happy lesson planning!